Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. 6 years after Belarus's disputed presidential election triggered the largest protests in the country's modern history, the democratic opposition is trying to turn years of exile into a strategy for what comes next. Following this past weekend's New Belarus conference in Warsaw, opposition figures are also preparing evidence they say could help hold Alexander Lukashenko's regime accountable for his role in Russia's war against Ukraine. Joining us now is Dzianis Kuchynski, diplomatic advisor to Belarus opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Hey, good to see you. Good to hear from you.
So Sunday, yesterday, the 9th of August, that was 6 years ago. That really is a big milestone, for many a very sad milestone in Belarus history. Give us your take on where we are, also what happened at that conference critically, and what comes next. How is Belarus going to move forward?
I think it was one of the most lively conferences, to be honest, that we organized in the last years. As you know, every year on this date, we try to gather all the democratic forces, political leaders, civil society, media. So basically, it's the main event for democratic forces over the year. But this year was specifically lively and interesting, vivid discussion because we also had a lot of our leaders who got released in the last 12 months. So we had Nobel Prize winner Ales Bialiatski for the first time, presidential hopeful, Viktor Babarika, head of the Christian Democracy Party as well, Pavel Severin. So that was a really, really lively discussion. And, as a result, we were debating a lot and thinking what's the next way forward as well for us, how we can strengthen the work of democratic forces on the one side, our agency on the other side, and also, make Lukashenko regime weaker, and hence as well making the Belarusian people stronger. And there were several resolutions, important one that have been passed. And one of the highlight as well, for me personally at least, of the conference was the resolution that we passed, but also a discussion on the Belarusian and Ukrainian relations. As you know, this year specifically, President Tsikhanouskaya and President Zelensky have reached a new level of cooperation between two of them, and President Zelensky clearly distinguishes the Belarusian regime and Belarusian people. Meanwhile, he's working with Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya as a representative of Belarusian people. He pushes Lukashenko and makes the price for him for his involvement in the war against Ukraine and helping Russia higher. And as well, of course, for the repressions against Belarusian people, and also for the the migration crisis and other form of hybrid attacks that Lukashenko does against the neighbors. So I think that was a really good discussion, and the document that we passed, it outlined as well the roadmap as well for us to work with Ukraine closely in the next year, because of course the fate of Belarus and fate of Ukraine, they are intertwined, interconnected. And of course, when Ukraine wins, it will be also the window of opportunity for Belarus. And actually, window of opportunity, it was also a big part of the discussion during the conference, how not to miss this opportunity, because this window will be very short. It will be, the moment X will come, but it can be very, very short, very limited. So we need to be not just sit and wait, but get prepared. Mm-hmm. So getting prepared was a big part of this conference. We were preparing different, reforms, legislations, activities. So when this moment comes, so we don't miss it. There was a lot of talk about the Polish roundtable as well, and actually the roundtable is also one of the discussion that we had during this conference. And the specific focus on the conference was also the new campaign that we start after this conference is post-Lukashenko Belarus. Mm-hmm. So because, time is running out for him, and this is the fact, but we need to get, not to miss the opportunity and get prepared, and also explain to the Belarusian people, Belarusian society inside and also outside the country, what it means post-Lukashenko, period. That it's not going to be this, this vacuum of maneuver, vacuum of proposals, vacuum of time. That's why, of course, what was very important again, that around 70, 80 foreign guests were there, diplomats, ambassadors, a special envoy from Ukraine, Ambassador Chernogor came as well. So there were a lot of also foreign people who were watching it, and I think this is also part of the discussion that we had, is how to maintain this agency of democratic forces and having also the support of our partners, of course, including Lithuania, Poland as our main partners, Latvia, of course, Ukraine, but also wider.
Also on that, I want to ask you, because what you've also just said, and one of the main themes of this conference, a window of opportunity. You don't want to miss it, the sense of urgency. But then I ask also practically, what does that look like? I mean, in essence, that democratic change, granted, will come also very much from abroad, will come from this opposition that is spread around Europe and the world. But what's preventing, let's say, a lot of that change and that pressure comes from Moscow, comes from Vladimir Putin. So let's say Lukashenko does go in some fashion, we don't know how. What's preventing the Kremlin from just simply installing another friendly leader there, and then all this effort, democratic effort, will have gone to waste? Or what exactly does that window look like, and how do you prevent said scenario from Moscow taking over again?
How to prevent? I think three words: people of Belarus. A lot of people were always, discussing what would Russia do? What would Russia say? What would Putin do? And of course, it's a relevant question, but we need not to undermine, the authority and the power of the Belarusian people. We don't have a pro-Russian or pro-imperialistic moods inside the country. Only less than 4% of the Belarusians want to be, part of Russia, being in the state union and so on. So the Belarusian people will not accept any other pro-Russian candidate. And they've been trying actually before that, with Ambassador Gryzlov and with some other so-called kind of governors. But, the Belarusian society, even the Belarusian nomenclatura, will not take it. Probably this is something that we are on the same page with nomenclatura, who are mostly, the technocrats actually in Belarus. They don't serve Lukashenko because they like him or because they love him. They serve because they're technocrats. So no one wants to lose the sovereignty of the country, and having some kind of a Russian governor in Belarus. But at the same time, of course, it's important to make Russia weaker. And here, what Ukraine is doing, and we see that, Russia is not almighty. Putin is not almighty. He's losing, friends and allies all over the world, and including in his, as he likes to say, backyard. We see it in many never Soviet or post-Soviet countries. And this is important, to continue to make him weaker. And here, Ukraine is, of course, the answer to the future, not only of Ukraine itself, of course, and Belarus, but also I think for the security and safety of Europe, because they are defending essentially the borders of Europe as well, not only their own independence. So here, of course, one of the answers as well to continue to make Russia weaker, continue to put pressure on both regimes in Minsk and Moscow, within the sanction policy, with non-recognition, with peace through strength, or also democracy through strength. And we see that it works. It works when you talk with them the language they understand. When it comes as well to your question about the sovereignty and the question about the window of opportunities, of course, you cannot do everything and many things actually from the exile, and we understand that. We are self-critical to that. But there was always the tactics of Soviet Union empire, and which Lukashenko is actually having the heritage of, is that when the opposition is outside of the country, they allegedly cannot do anything. Their influence is low, and so on. But we are not in Soviet Union. This time has all gone, and through the secure channels of communication, through social media, through the independent media as well, which are very well read and very well viewed in Belarus. So we don't lose this connection. So of course, it's important to maintain this contact with people inside the country, because essentially it will be the choice of Belarusian people where to live and how to live. And when this window of opportunity will open, of course, we as democratic forces, we have to come up with a proposal. We have to come up with partnership. We have to come up with solutions. But essentially, the most important part is, of course, people, both inside and outside the country. So this is also what we were discussing, is how to, continue to maintain this contact with people inside. And we see that Belarusians maintain to be pro-European, even though we have a really huge informational war, I need to say, in Belarus, because it's the paradigm and, the narratives that Lukashenko and Putin regimes are using, trying to say that Poland is an enemy, Lithuania is an enemy, Ukraine is an enemy, and the only friend that Belarus has is Russia. But people, they look for the information, they continue to read independent news, and they continue to verify the things that the regime is sending through all the channels in through the TV, radio, newspapers.
One of those things I just want to.
So this is also one of the part of the conference we were.
I want to ask you one more. I know there's a lot of information that you're sharing with us, but I do want to ask one quick one. Just before the end, Mr. Latushka, also involved with the opposition, has said that, and I'm quoting here, there's a lot of consolidated body of evidence for Ukrainian authorities that shows the complicity of Belarus with Russia. So just really quickly, can you tell us a little bit of what that kind of evidence is, and what do you want that sort of evidence to lead to? What effects will that lead to?
Ambassador Dushka is doing a great job on bringing, Lukashenko and his cronies to, accountability. And we have several cases one that Lithuania has started, in ICC through the forced deportation of Belarusians. The other one is, that we work with Ukraine as well as abduction of Ukrainian children with the help through the territory of Belarus and with the help of Lukashenko. So we are trying to work very narrowly and closely with Ukrainian authorities to strengthen these cases, through international accountability mechanisms and bring Lukashenko into account, because this is something that not just him, but his cronies and people who are still in the regime are really afraid of. So we need to put their price for their crimes higher and higher. And here, of course, the word of Ukraine and the support of Ukraine in these initiatives is very important. And when we had the visit in May, Minister Sibiha, and he was very supportive to this, and he continues to be supportive, same as President Zelensky. So we will continue to working on this track on bringing Lukashenko into account for the crimes that he has done against the people of Belarus, but also against the Ukraine, and in particular in the war, but also in particular with abduction of Ukrainian children. So
a lot of pressure, a lot of work ahead, but thanks so much for sharing all that really important stuff. Dzianis Kuchynski there, diplomatic advisor to Belarus opposition leader Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching World Talks, but do stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.